Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to D.G. Wills Books in La Jolla, California. We are delighted to have Robb Lawrence back to discuss his two definitive iconic books on Les Paul. Robb Lawrence wrote the original byline for Guitar Magazine's popular Rarebird column on vintage guitars. He began his association with Les Paul in 1972 and has been his West Coast concert tech for many memorable shows. Their association has included work on The Wizard of Waukesha, a 1978 about Les Paul, and the recent 2001 Grammys tribute film. Robb taught at La Jolla Music, of course, back in the 60s across the street.
Well, actually over there on Wall Street by the post office.
When he lived on Wall Street by the post office. The early years of Les Paul legacy emerged out of Robb's years of research, interviews, extensive vintage archives, etc., and gorgeous original photography. It's all here, the factory pictures, the designers, the electronics, the first experimental log and clunker guitars, clunker guitars, stories of the various gold tops, the humbucking pickup evolution, and pages dedicated to the heralded 50s sunburst standard. Exclusive interviews with Les Paul, as well as Michael Bloomfield, Jeff Beck, Freddie King, Peter Green, and Slash. Beginning with the collectible late 60s models, the modern era of the Les Paul legacy moves on to the 70s and 80s special themed instruments, showing all popular artist models like Jimmy Page, Joe Perry at Slash, and Living Color. The reissue 59 Sunburst and the jaw-dropping custom shop creations of the 90s received their due as achievements that have never to this day been surpassed. The book also covers Les Paul's resurgence, the comeback Grammy Award-winning album with Chet Atkins, the start of a weekly gig in a New York City jazz club, and the reconnection with the Gibson family. Since Les Paul's death in August 2009, this is the first book that covers his entire life, including his last performances at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the memorials in New York, and the burial in his hometown in Wisconsin. Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored to have Robb Lawrence back.
Thank you. Well, it's nice to be back here. It's really been one of my most favorite places to talk about Les Paul, and being my grandmother's hometown and living here, around here for many years. It's really great to share all this with you, so thank you for coming tonight. So it all kind of began, I guess, as a kid in Hawaii, when my father was stationed over there on the Iowa, and as a little kid, my brother and I, we would be over there in Waikiki, and we would see the hula dancers and the Hawaiian calls. Alec Perry presents Hawaiian, or the Harry Owens Orchestra. Some of you probably heard of that. And so we would see the guitar players and the steel guitar players and the ukuleles and the tipples. And it's pretty interesting. And so then we came back to San Diego and bought a house in Claremont, and next door to Greg Collier, who's over here somewhere. There he is, Greg Collier. And so one day, Greg and I, when we weren't breaking toys and getting in trouble, we came around the corner and we saw this rock and roll band playing in the garage. What band didn't play in the garage? That's the way it was. So, but we thought, wow, isn't that cool? And they were playing electric guitars and drums and so forth, and it looked really cool. So we had to have a guitar, and so our grandmothers were very gracious. And his grandmother bought him a Stella guitar. My grandmother bought me a K guitar. This is 1963, or Christmas of '63, I guess. '62, yeah. Wasn't it? 63? Somewhere in there. Anyway.
Close enough.
Close enough for rock and roll. So, yeah, we started playing all these surf songs and What I Say and Louie Louie and a lot of fun songs. And it was fun, but, we were playing acoustic guitars. And you could only do so much with acoustic guitar. And we wanted electric guitars, so Greg got a Stella. On his Stella, he had a DeArmond pickup, and I was jealous. I wanted to pick up my guitar. And our friends, some of them had Taisco Del Rey's. This is the first invasion of the Japanese guitars in America. And, but I was holding out because I wanted a Fender guitar. I didn't really know about Gibson guitars, although I'd seen a commercial that had a Three Musketeers candy bar commercial, and one of the guys in the Three Musketeers was playing a white SG Custom. That looked pretty fancy to me. And so, but since we were in the land of Southern California, where Fender guitars began, you know, we were listening to surf music and seeing Fender guitars too, so I got a Fender guitar. After I joined a band, I didn't have electric guitar. I needed a guitar, and so as it turned out, I would borrow a friend's guitar, and before I had an amp, I'd plug my guitar into our Webcore stereo in the family room, and we used to, you know, play all our Chubby Checker records. And, you know, the first record that I remember was the Rock Around the Clock with Bill Haley and the Comets. Later, I interviewed Fran Beecher, who played with Bill Haley, and Bill Turner is a friend of ours too, who played later with the Comets. So one thing led to the next, and I was playing guitar in bands in junior high school at Marston, and I'd heard rumors about Les Paul, and I had seen the TV show as a kid with Mary Ford, and you know, thought, wow, he played a wild guitar, and it was pretty fancy. But I'd heard rumors here and there, and then so then Greg Collier's sister, Carol Collier, moved to La Jolla here and started dating Jonathan Glazier, who was a guitar teacher at La Jolla Music Classical. And so he suggested to Joyce and Jim Peterson that I teach rock and roll guitar at La Jolla Music. And so over there on Wall Street, I started getting
How
students.
old were you then?
I was 16 years old, and I'd already been playing for 3 years. And I just constantly would get 45s, and I would spin them, and I would learn the songs. And sometimes I'd slow this down to 33 and get those complicated parts. But I developed my ear. I learned how to read music in school, but I had an ear for music. My dad played some clarinet, and my mom played boogie-woogie piano, and but they weren't really very musical later. And so Greg and I just stuck with it and kept playing guitar a lot. And so then once I started teaching guitar at La Jolla Music, one day Peter Webster came into the store from Chicago, who had a SG Les Paul standard model. He said he would sell it. And I'd heard about Les Paul guitars, and I'd seen the SG in that commercial, so I said sure. So I started paying him $50 every few weeks, every month or so, and I owned my first Gibson guitar. And it was exciting, and it had a beautiful sound to it, and a nice finish. And I still really didn't know much about Les Paul, the person. And so eventually I wanted to get my friend Paul Cowie, who played with the King Biscuit Blues Band here in San Diego. He started collecting guitars, and our friend Mike Dewar did too. And so they had these used guitars around, and they seemed to be quite beautifully built. And so by 68, I guess, I started seeing variations in the newer guitars with thicker finishes, and the necks were narrower, and they just didn't seem to play as well or sound as good to me. And so we started seeing these Les Paul guitars with the flame maple and so forth, and so I thought, oh, I gotta get one of those, you know. Little did I realize, you know, what would happen in the future. But so I went out on a blind date in Pacific Beach and met this nice lady who, when she went back to Phoenix, she looked in the paper and she found a Les Paul Sunburst, a standard model with a Tiger flame maple in 1960. And she told me about it, so I called the guy on the phone, and it sounded pretty cool. So I let my SG Les Paul go, and I flew out to Arizona to buy this beautiful Sunburst Les Paul. It's the one in the book that Les Paul's holding when he's winking at me. And, and so that was my first Sunburst Les Paul model. And it had a thin neck, which I kind of liked at the time, because my other neck on the other guitar was thin. And so that was my Les Paul guitar. And I bought a Stratocaster over here in La Jolla in '67 for $80, a 1954 model that one of my students' friends had over near where Mike lives. And it was like a really nice old Strat, but it had a kind of a round clubby neck, and it was an early model. And so I relegated it to number 2, and I ended up playing the Les Paul Sunburst as my main guitar. And so our band played up there in Cardiff and different places. I originally played over here on Bay Street with my old Fender guitar, 1967, when our band played there at the Hi-Ho Club. And so I was underage, and I'd have to go from the alleyway into the stage and play and then go back outside again. So it was like back and forth. I couldn't hang out in the club and stuff. So, but that was fun. And so when I was out there in Arizona getting that guitar, there was a couple that were traveling across the country in a beautiful motorhome, and this guy was a guitar player, and he was a big fan of Johnny Smith, and he told me about Johnny Smith. And he said, when you get back to San Diego, be sure to look up Bud Eastman, who was the founder of Guitar Player magazine, and he lived here in San Diego at the time. And so my bass player, Guy Folsom from La Jolla here, we went over and went to his birthday party, and we jammed. He played steel guitar. And I told him that I was going to take a trip across the country and check out guitars. And I had met Mr. Dopiera, the inventor of the National Dobro guitars in Escondido, prior to that. And his stories about the Dobro and how the Dobro came about, and the National Guitars, and Paul Barth, his nephew, spinning resonators, and George Beecham, and their family, and Mr. Rickenbacker, and all this history came at me, you know, with Mr. Dopiera and his little fret and fiddle shop in Escondido, and it was like fascinating to me. Just all these stories, and this is like mid-20s Los Angeles, and how the ampiphonic guitar predated the electric guitar, and it had like an aluminum diaphragm like a speaker. So it was like a speaker box in a guitar. And it pioneered this amazing sound, and it was loud enough to keep up with the drums and piano and everything like that, and horns. So the precursor to the electric guitar was the National and Dobro guitars, and his apprentice Dave Flood has the first one, and we've recently developed a new dual resonator guitar with a contour body that I helped design. Anyway, I thought this is fascinating history right here in front of me, and so I started interviewing Mr. Dopiera, and he had such fascinating stories about how it was in target practice at the factory, and people getting beat up, various things with the factory manager, and people drinking and all this stuff. Anyway, it was like a novel, so I thought, wow, this would be interesting to do a book, because I was photographing guitars as a hobby. Just, you know, all the guitars I'd find, used guitars, I'd take pictures of just for fun, just to document them and so forth. And couldn't buy them all. I bought some, but I couldn't own them all. So I just took pictures of various guitars, and it kind of became a hobby.